Especially they've gone down dramatically. And I predicted it in the book, but even I would not have thought it'd be that accelerated. I think personally, I think they've separated their professional lives, but I think what's really a great problem for them now, as of in the last few weeks, is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Tom Bower is back in the spotlight once again, and this time the conversation around Meghan Markle is taking a direction that few people expected. As a royal biographer known for digging deep into the lives of high-profile figures, his work often sparks strong reactions, especially when it touches on sensitive or long-debated topics. Now, with reports suggesting he is preparing an updated version of his previous work, attention is building around what new angles or details might be revisited, particularly when it comes to Prince Harry and Meghan's journey over the past few years. In recent remarks, Bower introduced a line of questioning that has quickly gained traction among royal observers. He hinted at certain aspects of Meghan's past that, according to him, may deserve another closer look, referencing discussions that have circulated quietly for years but never fully settled. While none of these points have been officially confirmed, the reaction has been immediate. Conversations are already spreading across online spaces, and as history has shown, when Tom Bower raises questions like this, people don't ignore them. They start paying attention very quickly. Tom Bower has stated that his latest research is built on a combination of archived media, publicly available records,
in his quill for a new edition of his book set to reveal huge secrets inside Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage,
and long-standing accounts that have circulated over time, all of which he attempts to piece together into a broader narrative. Those who follow his work closely often point out that his approach focuses on connecting details that may seem minor on their own, but take on a different meaning when viewed together. At the same time, it's important to keep in mind that none of these claims have been independently verified, and depending on who you ask, the same information can be interpreted in completely different ways. That divide in perspective is exactly what tends to fuel ongoing debate whenever his work resurfaces. What's drawing particular attention, in this case, is the suggestion that some of the discussion may involve references to documented material, which naturally raises the level of public interest. As more people begin looking into it, the conversation continues to build, with reactions forming even before any full context has been officially presented. And before going deeper into what's being said, it helps to understand why Tom Bower's voice carries so much weight in royal discussions, and why his comments rarely go unnoticed when they enter the public space. Tom Bower isn't viewed as a typical tabloid commentator, and that distinction is a big part of why his work continues to generate attention. In the UK, he's established a reputation as an investigative biographer who has spent years examining the lives of major public figures, from business leaders like Robert Maxwell to influential names such as Mohammed Al-Fayed and Simon Cowell, as well as members of the royal family itself. His approach is usually described as methodical and research-driven, often involving long periods of information gathering from a wide range of sources. Rather than focusing on quick headlines, his books tend to build narratives over time, which is why they often spark deeper discussion once released. In 2022, his book Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors became a major talking point across both media outlets and royal circles.
Meghan is living a life that she's winning and she's doing all these great things, but the reality is not that. The reality is
The portrayal of Meghan in that book was notably critical, and it quickly split opinion. Some readers saw it as a detailed and thorough investigation, while others challenged the way certain conclusions were presented. Regardless of where people stood, the impact was clear. It positioned Bower as a figure whose work people watch closely, especially when it comes to the Sussexes. One area in particular that drew attention in his research was Meghan's early life and the timeline leading up to her rise into global recognition, which continues to be a focal point in ongoing discussions. In one part of his analysis, Bower turns attention toward Meghan Markle's early timeline, particularly details surrounding her background that he believes warrant a closer look. Drawing from his interpretation of various sources, he suggests there are elements that, in his view, don't fully align as clearly as they appear on the surface. Meghan's publicly stated birth date, August 4, 1981, remains consistent across official records and widely accepted sources. However, Bower has indicated that certain past references and archived mentions have led him to question whether the timeline is as straightforward as it seems. At the same time, it's important to be clear that these suggestions remain contested. There has been no official confirmation that contradicts the established records, and much of the discussion is based on interpretation rather than verified updates to documented facts. Even so, the topic has started gaining momentum online, with some commentators exploring the possibility behind the claims, while others dismiss them entirely as speculation. As with many discussions surrounding high-profile figures, the divide in opinion only seems to be making the conversation grow. Because of that, the topic has quickly pulled Meghan back into the center of attention, with royal watchers once again dissecting details that had previously gone largely unnoticed. One example that keeps coming up in these discussions involves a magazine feature reportedly published in March 1997, which Bauer references as part of his research. According to his account, the article listed Meghan with an age that doesn't seem to match the widely accepted timeline based on her publicly stated birth year. If that date is taken at face value, she would have been in her mid-teens at the time, yet the age mentioned in the feature appears noticeably higher, creating a discrepancy that has sparked ongoing debate.
Meghan is a consummate survival actress. You raised this extraordinary beginning of the year when she carved 2025 in the sand. And it's a very, very interesting image that it came out on New Year's Day this year, because the previous weeks had been absolutely turgid and torrid for her. She had been dubbed Duchess Difficult again. There have been allegations of bullying.
Bauer has claimed that he went back to archived versions of the publication to verify that the material was authentic, which has only added more fuel to the conversation. For some observers, that detail makes the question harder to dismiss outright, especially when presented as part of a broader investigation. At the same time, others are quick to point out that inconsistencies like this are not unheard of, particularly in older print media where editorial mistakes were more common. As a result, opinions remain divided, with some viewing it as a simple publishing error, while others believe it raises questions that are worth examining more closely. The conversation doesn't stop there, because another detail often brought into this discussion relates to past online profiles and how certain information may have appeared at different points in time. According to Bauer, there were moments where Meghan's birth year was listed differently across industry-related platforms, which has added yet another layer to the ongoing debate. For some observers, this isn't necessarily unusual. They point out that discrepancies like this can happen for a range of reasons, including outdated entries, third-party edits, or simple database inconsistencies that were never corrected.
There are so many telltale signs that something is clearly wrong with Meghan. And I don't mean it in a bad way, but I mean, how can you get your age so wrong?
Especially on platforms that rely on user input or external updates, variations in personal details are not unheard of. At the same time, others see it differently, suggesting that changes in publicly visible profiles over time could contribute to confusion, particularly when multiple versions of the same information appear across different sources. It's also important to recognize that sites like IMDb, while widely used, are not considered official records, and the information on them can be edited or updated without the same level of verification as formal documents. Still, the fact that these differences have been highlighted keeps the discussion active, with people continuing to question whether they indicate something more significant or simply reflect the kind of inconsistencies that can happen over time. Another part of the discussion has focused on Meghan's time at Northwestern University, where she graduated in 2003 with degrees in theater and international studies. Based on her publicly stated birth year, that timeline appears to align in a fairly standard way with her age at the time of graduation, which is why it hasn't raised many questions in official records. However, Bauer suggests that when that period is examined more closely, certain details begin to stand out. In his research, he references alumni circles, archived university materials, and accounts from individuals who were present during that time, using them to build a broader picture of that chapter in her life. Some observers have pointed to perceived differences when comparing timelines, peer groups, and surrounding context, which has added another layer to the ongoing conversation.
Written about people whose lives are shrouded in mystery, and they want to hide their secrets, and I just love digging away to find out what they...
While none of these points have been definitively confirmed, they continue to be discussed, with opinions split between those who see them as meaningful and those who view them as coincidental. At the same time, there are many who urge caution when interpreting these kinds of comparisons, pointing out that without full context, it's easy to draw conclusions that may not fully reflect reality. University timelines, social circles, and career paths can differ significantly from person to person, which makes direct comparisons less straightforward than they might initially appear. Because of that, this part of the discussion remains highly contested, with no clear agreement among those following the story. Another detail that continues to surface involves a group photo from Meghan's time at Northwestern, which has been referenced in various conversations about her college years. According to Bauer, he attempted to contact individuals believed to be connected to that period in order to gain a clearer understanding of the context surrounding it. He suggests that some of the responses he received contributed to the broader questions he is raising, particularly when it comes to timelines and peer groups. However, these accounts have not been publicly verified, and there is no independent confirmation of their accuracy. As with many claims based on personal recollection, there is always room for variation. Memories can fade or shift over time, and without documented evidence, interpretations can differ widely. Supporters of Meghan argue that relying on limited or anonymous sources can lead to misleading conclusions, while critics believe it adds another dimension to an already ongoing and complex conversation. In the end, this remains one of the most debated parts of the entire discussion, with no clear consensus on what, if anything, it actually proves. Different interpretations continue to circulate, and without definitive confirmation, the topic stays open to ongoing speculation. Another element that has resurfaced in these conversations involves Meghan's father, Thomas Markle.
The palace and the machinery of the monarchy needs to take Harry and Meghan more seriously and make sure that Harry and Meghan's antics don't impact the
who has given multiple interviews over the years about her life and their relationship. Because of that, his comments often become part of the wider narrative whenever questions like these come up. According to Bauer's account, there was a point during his research when he directly asked Thomas Markle about details surrounding Meghan's birth. The response he reportedly received has been described as somewhat unclear, which has led some observers to interpret it as indirect or lacking specificity. As with many aspects of this story, reactions to that detail are mixed. Some see it as insignificant, while others believe it adds another layer to the broader discussion that continues to unfold. At the same time, it's important to keep in mind that much of this is based on reported conversations rather than independently verified records beyond what is already publicly established. Because of that, reactions remain split. Some people see these claims as adding fuel to ongoing speculation, while others argue they don't meaningfully challenge the widely accepted timeline. Regardless of where people stand, the discussion itself continues to gain traction and keep attention focused on the topic. Bauer's research also brings in comments linked to members of Meghan's extended family, including her half-sister Samantha Markle. Over the years, Samantha has spoken publicly about their relationship, often offering a very different perspective on Meghan's early life and family dynamics. According to Bauer's account, there are suggestions that certain aspects of their shared timeline may not fully align with how things have been presented publicly. Samantha, who was born in 1964, has at times implied that the perceived age gap between them doesn't entirely reflect how closely their lives overlapped while growing up, which has added yet another layer to an already complex and heavily debated narrative. At the same time, comments coming from family members, especially in situations that are already highly public, tend to be complicated and open to interpretation depending on context.
Was 12 years of age. So there is something that is not connecting. There is something that is not right. And I haven't been able to get a hold of a birth certificate, of a copy of a birth certificate. So if any of you can get it for me, please do so. So I started getting some emails from some of the subscribers, and they said, what if Meghan Markle was adopted?
Supporters of Meghan often stress that such statements should be viewed carefully, while critics see them as adding another layer to the broader narrative that continues to unfold. Like many parts of this story, there isn't one clear or universally accepted interpretation, which is exactly why the conversation keeps evolving rather than settling. The discussion doesn't stop at family dynamics either. It also stretches into Meghan's early professional years, particularly the period when she was working to establish herself in the entertainment industry. Based on her widely recognized birth year, her career progression, including roles she landed throughout the mid-2000s, generally aligns with what you would expect from someone building a career in their 20s, which is why this part of the timeline is often seen as more straightforward compared to other areas being debated. However, Bauer has argued that when you take a closer look at the early stages of her acting career, some elements don't entirely line up as neatly as they might first appear. He references her audition timeline and the kinds of roles she was going after during those years as part of a wider attempt to re-examine how that period unfolded. At the same time, many people within the entertainment industry point out that this kind of path is far from unusual. Building a career in Hollywood is often unpredictable, with long stretches of smaller roles, rejections, and slow progress being the norm rather than the exception. Because of that, opinions are split. Some believe there are patterns worth questioning, while others see nothing more than a typical early career struggle. When looking at her work before gaining wider recognition, Bauer also highlights the types of roles Meghan held during that phase. Like many actors starting out, she appeared in minor parts, commercials, and projects that didn't attract major attention at the time. For some commentators, this becomes part of a broader discussion about how her career evolved, especially when compared to common industry expectations around casting, timing, and progression. However, many professionals within the entertainment industry emphasize that there is no single path to success in acting, and career timelines can look very different from one person to another. When Meghan secured her role in Suits in 2011, it clearly marked a major turning point in her career, significantly raising her profile on an international level regardless of any debate around timing or progression. As with the other points being discussed, opinions remain divided. Some observers believe there are patterns that invite further questions, while others see her journey as a fairly standard example of persistence in a highly competitive field. Another reason this conversation continues to gain traction is the clear divide in how people interpret the same details. Critics argue that when multiple elements from different stages of someone's life are questioned at once, it naturally leads to increased scrutiny and curiosity. Supporters, on the other hand, point out that public figures often have inconsistencies in older records, especially when information has been reported, repeated, and sometimes misinterpreted over many years, which can easily create confusion without necessarily indicating anything unusual. They also point out that officially recognized documents and widely accepted records continue to support the background that has been publicly stated for years.
What they need to do is face up to the blackmail that is coming from California and in some way or other undermine Harry's and Meghan's credibility.
And this is exactly where the situation becomes more intriguing, because it's no longer about a single claim. It's about how different pieces of information are being interpreted in completely opposite ways. That contrast is what keeps the conversation alive and constantly expanding. Another detail that is resurfaced in these discussions involves Archie's birth certificate from 2019. Early versions of the document reportedly listed Meghan's full name, Rachel Meghan Markle, in line with standard official formatting. However, it was later updated so that her name appeared differently, reflecting her royal title instead. Changes like this quickly became a talking point, with some commentators questioning why the adjustment was made in the first place. Others, however, note that updates to official documents can occur for administrative, stylistic, or protocol-related reasons, especially in cases involving royal titles and formal naming conventions. Different media outlets have interpreted this detail in their own way, which has only added to the ongoing debate. Supporters argue that the update is consistent with how royal protocol is applied in official records, while critics see it as another small but notable detail that invites further scrutiny. As with many elements of this broader story, there isn't a single agreed-upon explanation, and the discussion continues to evolve as new perspectives are introduced. Tom Bower has also referenced this change in his research, suggesting that, from his point of view, it stands out when compared to what is typically expected in royal documentation. Some individuals familiar with royal procedures, however, maintain that variations in how names and titles are recorded are not entirely unprecedented, particularly when transitions in status or formal titles are involved, which adds yet another layer of interpretation to an already widely debated topic. At the same time, others emphasize that changes to formal records can happen for a range of administrative or protocol-related reasons, especially within royal contexts where titles and naming conventions are not always static and can evolve over time. Bower has presented his own interpretation of why this particular change may have taken place, but it's important to remember that it remains an interpretation rather than a formally confirmed explanation. Supporters of Meghan continue to argue that aligning official documentation with royal titles is standard practice and nothing out of the ordinary, while critics still question the reasoning behind the adjustment. As with many parts of this wider discussion, the exact same detail is being viewed in completely different ways depending on perspective. Bower frames it as part of a larger pattern, suggesting that certain choices may have been made to shape how personal information appears across different records, while others see no broader significance beyond standard procedural updates. At the same time, it's important to underline that this remains Bower's interpretation and has not been confirmed by any official sources. When his work was released, reports suggested that Meghan's side responded firmly, with representatives pushing back against claims they consider inaccurate or misleading. In situations like this, it's not unusual for legal teams to step in, particularly when the discussion involves personal details or interpretations that could affect public perception. At the same time, Meghan herself has not directly addressed many of these specific points in a public setting, which has only fueled further debate. For some observers, that silence is seen as a calculated decision, not giving additional attention to claims she may view as speculative. For others, it raises more curiosity, as the lack of a direct response leaves space for continued discussion and interpretation. And that ongoing divide is exactly what keeps this story active, with each new angle adding another layer to an already complex narrative.
Nothing original here.
I hope you're having the best birthday ever, Tessa. Thank you for everything.
Either way, the situation continues to draw attention, and that alone keeps the discussion alive. Bower has suggested that the absence of a direct response adds another layer to the narrative, arguing that silence can sometimes create more speculation than a clear denial ever would. At the same time, many strongly disagree with that perspective, pointing out that public figures often choose not to engage precisely to avoid giving further visibility to claims they consider unsubstantiated. As the conversation has expanded, some commentators have even started exploring hypothetical legal angles, questioning what the implications might be if personal details in official records were ever found to be inaccurate. It's important to stress, however, that these discussions remain largely speculative and are not based on confirmed findings or official rulings. Supporters of Meghan continue to emphasize that there is no verified evidence backing these claims, while critics argue that the questions themselves are worth examining. That tension between speculation and established fact is exactly what keeps the topic so actively debated. At this stage, the conversation has clearly moved beyond any single claim and evolved into a much broader discussion about credibility, public perception, and how narratives around high-profile figures are shaped and sustained over time. Some royal watchers believe that when questions like these keep resurfacing over time, they naturally keep public curiosity alive, even in the absence of clear or definitive answers. Others take the opposite view, arguing that repeated speculation without verified evidence can gradually create a distorted narrative, especially when older details are revisited and reinterpreted through a modern lens. And this is where the situation becomes more layered, because it's no longer just about the claims themselves, but about how those claims are received, challenged, and amplified across different platforms. The conversation starts to take on a life of its own, shaped as much by public reaction as by the original information. Until there is clear and verifiable clarification from official sources, many believe this is the kind of topic that will continue to resurface rather than fade away. Bauer has also mentioned discussions with legal commentators in connection to these claims, suggesting that, at least in theory, any proven inaccuracies in official records could raise broader legal questions. However, those points remain hypothetical and part of ongoing commentary rather than confirmed legal concerns, which once again highlights the gap between speculation and established fact that continues to define this entire discussion. It's important to emphasize that these kinds of discussions are entirely hypothetical and depend on circumstances that have not been proven or established in any official capacity.
Which is really such a fake when she was younger. English.
Legal experts often speak in what-if scenarios, outlining possibilities rather than confirming real-world outcomes, and that distinction matters when conversations like this begin to gain traction. Supporters of Meghan strongly reject the idea that there is any foundation for these claims, pointing to the lack of verified evidence and the consistency of officially recognized records. At the same time, critics continue to explore these theoretical angles, which is one of the main reasons the topic keeps circulating across online discussions. In reality, without confirmed findings or formal statements, these points remain speculative interpretations rather than established facts. Bauer has suggested that, from his perspective, the stakes tied to these conversations could be significant, particularly in terms of public image and potential professional relationships. However, it's crucial to underline that there is no confirmed evidence indicating any legal or financial consequences connected to these claims, and at this stage, the discussion remains firmly in the realm of interpretation rather than verified reality. At the same time, conversations like this often don't stay contained to the original topic. They tend to expand, bringing in additional rumors that begin circulating across different corners of the internet. One example includes speculation about Meghan's past relationships and aspects of her personal life. It's important to be very clear here. These claims remain unverified and are not supported by credible evidence or any official sources. Because of that, many observers strongly caution against treating such rumors as factual, pointing out how easily narratives can spiral when speculation is repeated often enough. Still, the fact that these stories continue to appear highlights just how wide-ranging and complex the overall discussion has become. Bauer has also pointed to what he describes as gaps within Meghan's public timeline, suggesting that there are periods he believes have not been fully explained. As with the rest of his analysis, this remains his interpretation, and without confirmed evidence, it continues to sit within an ongoing debate rather than a settled conclusion. However, he stops short of drawing any definitive conclusions from those observations. From that point, some online discussions have taken these ideas further, building their own theories around what they see as gaps or missing context. It's important to stress that these theories are not backed by verified evidence and remain firmly within the realm of speculation. Claims involving personal matters, especially those connected to family history or past relationships, are particularly sensitive and should be approached carefully.
What is going on here? Why the secrecy around this woman's birth certificate? Why the secrecy? Why the mistakes in age that are so blatant for others?
Supporters of Meghan strongly reject these narratives, describing them as unfounded and driven more by assumption than fact. Others continue to question whether there are still unanswered details, but without credible confirmation, those questions remain just that, questions. At this stage, these claims continue to circulate in certain discussions, but they have not moved beyond the level of rumor into anything substantiated. What Bauer's book has done, however, is bring renewed attention to topics that have been debated for years, particularly among audiences who closely follow the royal family. By presenting his interpretation of various details, he has effectively reignited conversations that might have otherwise faded, ensuring that the discussion continues to evolve rather than disappear. He ultimately encourages readers to draw their own conclusions based on the material he presents. Rather than delivering clear-cut answers, his approach is to raise questions, many of which have already been circulating online, and place them into a broader narrative. That method, combined with his critical tone, has played a major role in how the book is being received and discussed. At the same time, many supporters of Meghan strongly push back against his conclusions, arguing that they are not grounded in verified or confirmed facts. And this is exactly where the divide becomes most visible, the gap between interpretation and confirmation. That tension is what continues to keep the story active and firmly in the public spotlight. In his overall assessment, Bauer takes a distinctly critical stance, suggesting that Meghan's public image may not fully align with how he interprets her private story and motivations. His work spans multiple aspects of her life, from her background to her role within the royal narrative, offering a perspective that has sparked strong and often polarized reactions on both sides of the debate. Supporters of Meghan strongly push back against these kinds of portrayals, arguing that they rely more on selective interpretation than on fully verified facts. Others, however, believe Bauer's analysis raises questions that continue to capture attention, particularly when it comes to how public figures shape, control, and present their image over time. This is exactly where the divide becomes most visible. On one side, there are those who see a carefully managed narrative that has evolved over the years.
For writing family off because it would seemingly justify and perhaps delay the revelation of all of the lies that she had told the royal.
The thing about Meghan, she is a very, very deceitful person.
On the other, people who believe her public story has remained consistent and that much of the criticism is overstated. What can't be ignored, though, is that Bauer's work has intensified the spotlight, pushing this entire conversation even further into public focus. So where does that leave things now? Meghan's officially stated background hasn't changed, but the debate surrounding it clearly isn't fading anytime soon. Unless new, verified information comes forward, opinions are likely to remain split, with both sides firmly holding their ground. Here on Palace Loop, we'll keep breaking it all down, what's being claimed, what's actually confirmed, and what still leaves people asking questions. I want to hear your take. Do you think these claims actually carry weight, or is this whole discussion being pushed too far? If you found this interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe to Palace Loop, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next.